All right. Let's jump into this verse, Romans 8:28.
Okay.
Yeah, it's everywhere, right?
Okay.
All things work for good. Like, it's on coffee mugs.
Right, right.
But we're going deeper here.
Hmm.
You've got all these commentary stories, and honestly, I'm kind of excited to unpack it all.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting is right out the gate, a lot of the sources, like, they don't shy away from the tough stuff
Oh, for sure.
out upon the waters. It just comes right out and says, some things just suck. Like, it doesn't try to sugarcoat it, you know?
No, not at all.
It acknowledges that there's real pain.
Exactly. So then where does that leave us with that whole all things work together part?
Right, yeah.
Because it's not like the verse is saying, hey, everything's sunshine and rainbows.
Right, exactly.
So how do we make sense of that?
Well, a few sources I saw, they pointed out this really key difference.
Okay.
It's not that everything is good, right? It's that God can work through anything. Good, bad, even the stuff we think doesn't matter.
I like that.
Like, out upon the waters uses this word redeeming.
Okay.
Like, God can take even the broken things and make them new. Isaiah 43:19 talks about that too.
So it's not so much that God makes bad things happen so good can come from them.
Right.
It's that he can use even those bad things for his purpose.
Exactly. It's like, think about Joseph, right? Sold into slavery by his brothers. Horrible, right?
Awful.
But it's those exact events that put him in a position to, like, save his whole family later, you know, during the famine.
Right.
The whole story's in Genesis, chapters 37 through 50. It's wild.
Yeah, it's crazy when you think about it like that. Meant for evil, used for good.
Totally.
That's a good way to put it.
It's almost like the crucifixion itself, right? Awful, horrible thing, but...
Foundation of our faith.
Exactly. But I do wonder, because this comes up a lot, what about people who don't believe? Like, does Romans 8:28 offer anything to them?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
That's where the who this promise is actually for gets important, I think.
Yeah, and the sources, they had a few different angles on this.
Okay.
Bible.org is pretty clear. It says, this is for those who love God, who have been called according to his purpose.
So it's not like a get out of jail free card for everyone, just because.
Right, it's about having that relationship with God through Christ.
Which then makes me think, what's his called according to his purpose even mean? Like, is that something we're born with, or is it a choice we make?
That is a big question. Theologically, there's a lot to unpack there.
How about that?
Like some commentaries, Cambridge being one, they lean toward this idea of predestination. You know, God choosing specific people.
So it's not about us doing enough good things to earn God's love.
No, and Bible.org gets into the practical side of it. It's like, if you're truly following God, it'll show.
Okay, so what does that look like, practically speaking?
It mentions loving the Bible, turning from sin, wanting to please God. It's less about, you know, how we feel at any given moment and more about a real change deep down, how we see the world, ourselves, everything.
I could see that. But it still feels like a bit of a paradox, doesn't it? Like, if God's already chosen, where does that leave our free will? And how could anyone really know if they've been called in the first place?
Yeah, that's a question people have been debating for, like, centuries.
Oh, yeah, let's not even get into that whole John Calvin versus Jacob Arminius thing.
Right. But I think out upon the waters makes a good point here. It's like, instead of getting stuck on figuring out predestination and free will, maybe we should focus on the fact that God's invitation is always there. It's up to us whether we say yes or no.
So it's not about solving some big theological mystery. It's about how we respond to God's love.
Yeah, exactly. And that love, it changes us. It transforms us from the inside out, which kind of goes back to that idea of good. You know, it might not always be about being comfortable or successful in life.
Right, it's not like some prosperity gospel thing.
Not at all. It's about God shaping us into those heavenly creatures, like Out Upon the Waters talks about. It's about becoming more like Christ, even when it's hard.
Yeah, okay. So that makes sense with what we were saying about Joseph and Jesus. Their suffering wasn't for nothing. God used it to redeem, to heal, to bring about something way bigger.
Totally. And that's the thing about Romans 8:28. It's tough to grasp when we're hurting. When we think about good, it usually means what feels good right now, what's easy.
But God sees the bigger picture, right?
Yeah,
He's got that eternal perspective.
Exactly. It's like that analogy in Out Upon the Waters about our lives being like ingredients in this cosmic cake. We might feel like a cracked egg at the moment, but God sees the whole recipe. He knows it's all coming together.
Love that analogy. Good reminder that we don't always see how things end. We got to trust the baker.
Right.
Trust the process.
Exactly. And that's not easy, especially when we see real suffering. Like Bible.org talks about this couple, Scott and Janet Willis. They lost 6 children in a car accident. How do you even begin to reconcile that with Romans 8:28?
It's those kinds of stories where you just want to say, okay, Forget about all things work together for good, but I'm guessing that's where that eternal perspective comes in.
Absolutely. We can't always see the good in this life. It's about the final destination, not just the journey. And that destination, the kingdom of heaven, it's not some far-off thing. It's woven into our lives right now, even in the middle of the hard stuff.
So even when everything's falling apart, we can hold on to the fact that God's using those experiences to prepare us for that kingdom for eternity with him.
That's it. Think about Joni Eareckson. Ta-da, she's a quadriplegic. She's dealt with cancer, but she sees her disability not as a curse, but as a way to minister to others.
That's incredible. It's like she's saying, yeah, this thing happened, it was awful, but I'm not going to let it define me. I'm letting God use it. But not everyone's going to be Joni Eareckson, ta-da, right? Not everyone's going to be a speaker or writer because of their suffering.
Right. And I like that Bible.org makes that point, too. It's not always going to be something huge and public, the good God brings from our struggles.
Yeah.
It might be something quiet, something inside us.
Absolutely.
Like a stronger faith or more compassion or just appreciating the simple things more.
Yeah, those things might not make the news, but they matter to God.
Exactly. And that's where I think it's so important to remember that God is in control. Even when life gets crazy and we forget about the big picture.
It's like we need that eternal perspective right in our faces all the time.
Yeah.
Especially when everything around us feels messed up.
Yeah.
Totally. So it's not about just accepting whatever happens. It's about really holding on to that truth that God's working everything together, even when it's hard.
Yeah, and Cambridge points out that this idea, it wasn't something new back then, in the early church. It was like the core of what they believed.
That was how they lived.
Exactly. So it's not passive, it's active. We got to cling to that truth.
So it's a journey then, learning to trust God more even when we don't get it.
It is, and it takes practice, just like working out a muscle. The more we're in God's word, really thinking about it, the more we'll see him working in our lives.
Even the little things.
Yeah.
Even the bad stuff.
Right, all of it.
Right.
And that's how that trust muscle gets stronger. So when the hard times come, we can actually hold on to that hope from Romans 8:28.
That makes me think about those random things out upon the waters.
Yeah.
Talks about.
Yeah.
Like walking into a wall or falling off a treadmill. Not like life or death stuff, but still part of life,
And that's where it gets really interesting. Like if God is using everything, even those little things, to shape us, to tell our story.
It makes you wonder about the bigger picture for sure.
Right. What about all those moments, those near misses, the things that make you go, that was weird.
Okay, so what are we supposed to do with those? Those little things that we usually just forget about.
It's like those little brush strokes on a painting. When you step back, they all add up to this masterpiece. We might not see how those moments fit in right now.
But they're still part of the plan.
Totally. It makes you think if we could see our lives the way God sees them.
We'd probably be blown away, right?
Exactly. All those things that seemed pointless at the time, they'd all make sense.
Makes you want to pay more attention to those little things, those everyday things we usually ignore.
It's about embracing the mystery. We don't have to have all the answers. And Out Upon the Waters actually says that sometimes the best stuff comes from wrestling with the questions, not getting stuck on finding the answers.
It's like we're all pieces in this giant puzzle. And even the pieces that look boring or like they don't fit, they matter in the end.
Exactly.
Which leads to that big question from Out Upon the Waters. What if we say we don't want to be a part of the puzzle? Like if our lives are the ingredients in this big cosmic cake, what if we're like, no thanks, I'm good?
Whoa. That's a powerful image, right? It makes you think about our choices, our attitudes, and how those affect not just us, but everyone else too, that kingdom of heaven that's being built right now.
It's a good reminder that what we do matters, even when we feel like we're just going through the motions. And that even though life can be hard and confusing, God's working through it all for good, for those who love him and are called according to his purpose.
And, we may never understand all the reasons behind what happens to us, but we can always hold on to the one who holds us, who loves us, who promises to never let go. Even when life feels like a total mess, he's still working. He's still creating. And that final result, it's going to be amazing.
So as we deal with whatever life throws at us, let's hold on to that promise. Trust the one who's got the plan and try to be the best we can be, even if it means going through some tough stuff along the way. This has been an awesome deep dive. Thanks for listening, everyone.